Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to day 2 of Unbound London. Thank you very much all for coming back. It's great to see such a healthy crowd on day 2. As I'm sure you know, we've got a great lineup of content for you over the next few hours. We've got people like the CTO of the NHSX. We've got the Ministry of Defence. We've got people from Lloyd's. We've got a workshop later from Vice Media, the head of innovation from Vice Media, which you should all check out. We've got another startup battle. I'm sure you saw all the great startup battles yesterday. We've got a Envirotech and Health Tech startup battle. That's at 2 o'clock in the future stage, so make sure to check that out. And yeah, really happy to see you all here, and I hope you're having a good time and enjoying Unbound London. We trended on Twitter yesterday. Let's try and do that again today, so get tweeting. Obviously, as you know, you can download the app through Socio. You go to the App Store, it's a Socio event app, and find the Unbound London segment within the app, and then you can connect with other people here, set up meetings, chat, look at the agenda, and plan your day. So let's get started with the first panel this morning, looking at digital transformation. We've got speakers from Capita, the Ministry of Defence, Revolut, Ogilvy, and Viacom. And to introduce them and moderate the panel is the great Kenneth Cukier, who is the senior editor at The Economist. Kenneth, thank you.
Mark, thank you very much. Hey, is my mic even on? It is. Hey, good morning. You guys are clapping and we haven't even started. It's going to be a great conference. Wow, I feel really excluded, but maybe that's a good thing. And the reason why it's a good thing, you're all bunched up together, is that sometimes moderators are very polite to their victims on stage, but I'm a journalist, and this is an adversarial relationship. We're going to have to slug it out on digital transformation. So the first thing I want to do is ask a question, and you're allowed to answer one word, right? In your experience, when you see digital transformation projects in the world, are they usually more often failures or more often successes? So you have to either say failures or successes. James?
Failures. Failures.
Failures.
Failures. Successes.
Whoa! Yeah, okay, so you're clapping. You're just optimists. It says something about your personality and less about digital transformation. Now, I can barely see you because there's a lot of smoke in here, but I want to now poll the audience. Failures or successes? Who here thinks that when you look at all the digital transformation projects in industry, they tend to be failures? Raise your hand. Okay, yeah, so that's like 66.1% of you. All right, now who here says actually they're mostly successes? On balance, they're successes. Raise your hand. As a proportion, it's really about 10 to 1. Okay, so you guys, it's not that you're wrong, it's that you've got a sample bias, I'm sure. And
I thought I had to bring a note of optimism.
Why successes?
Clearly, there's a lot of activity that happens in the digital transformation space, and there are a lot of failures. But I think we have to be optimistic. The reason digital transformation is an imperative is because customer expectations are higher than ever. So the last experience I had with Spotify or with Amazon is what I expect from every other company. And I think we have to kind of applaud the efforts. It's about not just thriving as businesses, but it's also about surviving. And I think, some businesses have gone by the wayside, but we've got a lot of well-established heritage businesses that are still succeeding and still growing.
I wonder if maybe you are, again, to sample bias, you're in a sector of the transformation that's a little bit easier than others. At Ogilvy, since you're dealing with communications, you're looking at the superficial aspects, if you will, in the case, what's on the surface of the transformation. But you're not down in the weeds where, the wires are and where the code base is, are you?
God, if only my job were that easy, that would be fantastic. No, I think it's actually, you could look at kind of communications as a very superficial layer in terms of building experiences, but what we do is actually much more profound. And our point of view is that brands have an opportunity to be the galvanizing force for change in organizations that are undergoing change. So what is the purpose of the brand? What does it stand for? that can bring the HR function rallying around the employee experience, the IT function, in terms of what technology needs to do to deliver the customer experience.
Okay, it's still brand. It's still sort of the experience of the technology, not the technology itself. Serge, you answered, yeah, failure. Tell me about your most prized and beautiful failures.
Well, it's tough, right? I mean, it's, first of all, what does transformation mean? I think a lot of corporates fall into the trap of not really painting out the end kind of zone that they're trying to get to. It's very much, here's where we are today, how can we do more of what we do today? How do we protect what we have? How do we incrementally move on using what we currently have? Whereas if you're talking about true transformation, and I spent the last 3 years living over on the west coast of the US, you talk to some of the businesses there, and it's not that they are committed to transformation. It is just a culturally embedded way of thinking and working. It's how you do work. And so there, transformation is not a program as such. It's just a cultural way of thinking about the future of your business. And I think that's the challenge for kind of established corporations. It's without some sort of a burning platform, without a clear North Star to guide the journey, it's very, very difficult to align the relevant pieces. And there are many pieces that need to be aligned for this to deliver meaningful change.
Danny's nodding vociferously, and you said burning platform, and it sounds like he can, working at the Ministry of Defense, you can relate to burning platforms.
So actually, my observation is, I think, so there's two parts. So when you see stories about transformation or digital transformation, they are usually successes because they're the 10% that people want to talk about. They're not the 90% of things that actually don't go very well. And I think, an observation, and I think the burning platform is the thing that really focuses it, is you see lots of projects or lots of programs, and they're implementing new technology. But actually, when you start to look at what was the thing that the organization's really trying to do, they actually haven't transformed that much. They brought in maybe a different way of doing something, but it hasn't fundamentally changed how they work or how the business operates, or even in a commercial world where the business operates, the market. And so I think it's always this balance between what you see, what you don't see, and also is the project that's being done truly transformative for the organization?
From my experience, there's always a couple people in an organization that want transformation, but the organization doesn't want the transformation. They're comfortable with the way things are. If they weren't, why would the people be doing it? And it's probably worked, unless it is a burning platform. Namrata, you've been very silent.
Been hiding.
Hiding, exactly. You're all bunched together. Come out. Tell us.
I think I see digital transformation as a pyramid structure where you've got people at the top, you've got processes, you've got technology. I think most of the transformation, if it's solely focused on technological change, is generally successful, I would say. Even processes, there's a high possibility that it would be successful towards the end. But I think the people change is the biggest problem that most organizations face, because you're changing the culture, you're changing, especially for large organizations, if it's a bank or a telco company, you've got all these history of 100, 150 years. How do you change that? How do you change the way people think, the way people perceive the organization to be? I think that's the biggest problem. And I think, as Serge mentioned about the West Coast, those, they are already where organizations like us want to be. So I think it's always easy. They don't need transformation. The other thing about transformation I see is most organizations create a separate entity that's called a transformation department. I think that's another problem, because you've got this group of highly intelligent people you recruit from different companies, and you put them aside. They're supposed to transform the company. However, they don't know most of the times about the culture of the company at all. So I think that's the biggest problem. There's a huge gap between the to-be and what we are today. And I think bridging that gap probably is the biggest problem.
I think the human problems are the right ones, but I wonder if it starts at the top. If you look at a typical CEO, the way he or she got there was by playing by the rules. Yeah. They don't want to change the rules. In fact, they're at the top because they didn't even realize they were marching in lockstep, obeying the rules. So they don't even see transformation as a good thing. In fact, it's an enemy to the organization.
But I think that's why the whole conversation about diversity in boards, and I'm not saying diversity in terms of gender or just ethnicity, but diversity in terms of age as well. You've got a board of directors, everybody from the similar cohort, why not have people from, have a few millennials in the board, people from a different era of thinking? My idea of digital would be very different from my son's idea, who's only one. So, it's kind of two different generations almost clashing with each other. So I think that's another problem. You've got a bunch of people who want to bring a change, but you don't really know what that change should be because you've only read in the papers. You haven't actually been through that journey. So I think diversity plays a huge role in that.
And I would just add to that. So I work at Revolut, and prior to that, I was a management consultant for my sins. And I worked in financial services, so I saw quite a few of the banks who were trying to do digital transformation projects. And all of them looked at Revolut and were like, how do we do that? And at that point, I decided that I wanted to go and work for Revolut. But anyway, the point is, all of the people leading those transformation projects, their go-to tool was a Gantt chart or like timelines, like super detailed stuff, like, okay, we need to do top-down approach for everything. And then I joined Revolut, and Nikolai, who's the CEO who spoke here yesterday, he'd started Revolut from scratch. He's the one who built the first iteration of the app. He knows how to build products. And so I think to your point, like, he has it in his DNA and then empowers the rest of the organization to act in the same way. And I think the difference that I've seen between that and maybe how some of the bigger organizations work is just really stark and really makes the biggest of differences.
So are they all going to fail, or can they sort of get inoculated with the DNA of innovation and then cross the chasm?
The big banks?
Or just the big anythings?
Big anything. Well, I'll talk about banks because that's what I vaguely know a bit more about. I think it's really, really hard for them now, partly because it's not part of their brand, as we were saying. It's not part of their DNA. A bank is in many ways designed to kind of continue going like a juggernaut, come what may. There's a whole load of processes and structures in place. And I think that's what makes kind of this true transformation very, very different when you compare it to the likes of Spotify and Apple, who really are just digital businesses in the first place. Yeah. So for them, a transformation is, I don't think it's a transformation, it's just a continuation.
Yeah. And can I just add one thing to that? I think that I spent the largest part of my career in the startup world before I moved back into corporate. And it's a really interesting dynamic here, because corporate innovation is really about managing a whole ecosystem of relationships. And it's not just the management and the staff, but let's not forget the shareholders who, lest we forget, actually own the business. And so if you're a big corporate, particularly publicly listed one, it's not that you are not creative, innovative, etc., but actually the expectations from the city, from the shareholders, dictate that you are actually somewhat limited in how much risk you can take, because you've got your quarterly targets to hit, and that gets in the way. And so I don't think it should be a surprise that any sort of transformation is kind of following some sort of incremental path. We did that last year, we'll do 3% more this year. Woohoo, aren't we great? But if you move into the startup world, the path is far more exponential, right? And the first period, you're actually talking about very low returns until eventually that sort of crossover happens, and then. And I think that's a really, really difficult challenge for corporates to accept, because in any given quarter, going for any of these exponential projects just doesn't make sense, because they don't give you the returns in that quarter, but you never get the time to rebuild the exponential, to reach the exponential side.
Yeah, it's definitely part of the joy of being part of a small company. Is the time horizon you're optimizing over is much longer, I think, than what big banks have the luxury of, and that enables us to build for the future rather than focusing on short-term stuff.
So part of the conversation we were having a little earlier before we come on stage was when you look at a large organization, how much do you try and change the whole machine, and how much do you actually just go start again and actually try and influence from the outside in? And I think that getting that right balance is something that touches a bit of the, you want to start something with the leadership at the top, but actually trying to change a really large organization in terms of all its people is really difficult. So maybe having a few small areas of a catalyst of change can help accelerate that. And I speak from experience of trying to change an organization from a innovation culture, which was probably the hardest thing I tried to do and didn't work. But actually doing it in pockets worked really well. And I think from the technology or the transformation part, again, if you try and change the whole organization in one go, I think it just, can take too long, and there's just too much legacy to deal with. And so you've got to understand where can you have the biggest impact and make the biggest momentum that can then bring the rest of the organization with you, rather than trying to do the whole thing in one go. And it's sort of, everybody would love to be a startup, but you've got a whole load of legacy to balance with, and so it's picking the points that you can get the most acceleration from.
Yeah.
Why bring them along with you? Why not push them out a window?
Well, that's right.
Why bring them along with you? Why not push them out a window?
And say that's the debate we're having. So there's some things where you can look and say, actually, it's a lot easier, and I'll have a far better solution if I just build as though I was greenfield, and I'll just end of life what I was doing before and migrate users. And there's some things you can do that, and there's some things in our world which are very operationally orientated. It's really difficult to do that, and so it's picking the ones you want to go and say, right, how do I move really fast and just build new, and which ones do I need to try and bring the whole organization with me?
Yeah, and I think there'll always be naysayers. I think it's about, firstly, proactively engaging the whole organization. So having an employee engagement program, having a change management program, and not just a kind of digital transformation program that's operating off on the side, but actually getting everybody involved. And I think to the point on time horizons, what we tend to look at with clients is kind of planning on 3 different time horizons. So transformation for years, transformation each quarter. So what are the kind of program level things? And then pulse level transformation. So what are the daily things which different types of employees can then get engaged in terms of taking advantage of digital?
And I don't buy it. I think that companies like Nokia had employee engagement programs. I think sometimes you need a bulldozer.
I think very quickly it becomes obvious when you can't, take everybody on the journey. But I think operating digital transformation in a silo is going to be very difficult to transform the whole company.
So I have a...
Let me pose to the audience first. Okay, all those in favor of like snowflake management, bring everyone with you, versus Bruce Lee management, kick ass and leave. Okay? Snowflake, raise your hand. Snowflakes. Yeah, come on, snowflakes. Come on, snowflakes are melting in the sun. Come on. Okay. And Bruce Lee, raise your hand. Snowflakes have it. Snowflakes have it. Okay. And the rest of you want to be this sort of like on the fence, either way, not quite sure, happy to work at Nokia, I work at Yahoo kind of guy? All right. Just want to be clear on that. Danny, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I sort of have probably more of the Bruce Lee view. So I think ultimately you have to get your whole organization there, or you have to change the shape of your organization. But I say my experience of trying to do that before, it is just too slow, too hard. You spend a lot of effort in trying to bring people with you that really don't want to transform or change. And so for me, I think the mechanism is find the areas that can have the biggest impact to the organization. Can, from the individuals in there, act as a hub or a catalyst. And so if more of the naysayers will say, well, I'm not really sure, but actually, if person A or B is really on board with this journey, and actually, God, they're doing some really interesting stuff, then that will accelerate the rest of the organization. So for me, it's find the points of light, accelerate them, and that will bring the rest of the organization with you.
Can I add to that? I'm really not surprised, actually, because to my mind, transformation is not a homogeneous animal. This is not, transformation is a black box. This is how you do transformation. It's a sort of a multifaceted animal. I think you have to recognize that doing what we do today better is a necessary part of the journey. That pays the bills today, right? And it's an absolutely valid way to innovate and a valid way to transform a part of the organization, because why wouldn't you? That's that hits the quarterly thing, etc. But then you also have to recognize that actually there are areas of the business that need to have a step change. Okay, the clients expect it, the market's moved on, whatever it is. Trying to bring the whole organization to do that is a losing battle. It's never going to happen. It just takes too long. And so to Danny's point, pick the areas where you can have the biggest wins. And then there's even a third layer, to my mind, which is the genuinely sort of disruptive thing that can cannibalize your entire business model. Now, that to me is something that's never going to happen within. I get nauseous when I hear we're going to get this, we're going to disrupt ourselves before we get disrupted. It just cannot happen within the organization, to my mind. That happens through external partnerships and ways to collaborate with other people who don't have the baggage of the internal politics, the internal bureaucracy, etc. But all three layers of transformation are very, very valid and I think necessary, to my mind.
How do you empower the people in your organization who have the vision, who see what's coming? Like, hey, who can say without irony, we've got to disrupt ourselves before we get disrupted, but have no power in the organization. Because by dint of them being able to be on the ground and seeing it, they're almost axiomatically not the managers who are a little bit more secluded from what's happening. So how do you empower them?
So I can give you an example in our organization today. So, and it's interesting to see the reaction from the rest of the organization. So one of our senior people decided that actually we wasn't driving enough change quickly enough in the organization. And they did the thing that people often say is good or bad, is they said, right, we're going to have a standalone innovation team that I want you to disrupt the main machine. And pretty much he gave them a whole set of rules that didn't fit with anything that the rest of the organization had to follow. So there was a new set of rules, and then there was individuals that they recruited into that team that followed the rules but under their own interpretation, which is a subtle difference. And actually, they've managed to make really good progress in a different way of engaging with the market and with actually bringing quite disruptive things into the organization. They've been going about 2 years now. They're still having a good effect. The reaction by the rest of the organization has gradually changed from, don't like them,
cynicism,
the antibodies in the organization, we want to stop them, etc., to actually now starting to embrace them. And there's lots more bits of the organization going to them to say, actually, how can you help solve my problem? So it was giving them a whole different context to the rest of the organization to say, I'm going to give you top cover, I'm going to give you a whole load of different rules you can use, go do.
I mean, I agree with Danny on that, because I think in an organization, everybody, it doesn't matter on the level of the employee, but everybody likes to be part of a success story. I think kind of learning by example, it's very interesting. But as you mentioned, when you see, initially there'll be naysayers who would be doubting probably every step of the transformation project. But then when after a few months or years, if they see change in the positive direction, they want to be part of that project. They want to work for you. And I think that's probably the most beautiful example of kind of leading change program by positive example. The other thing about transformation, I think there's a lot of negative press around the word transformation because it indirectly means loss of jobs, redundancies. And so when there is a comms saying, oh, we are starting this transformation project starting next year, a lot of employees actually read that as, okay, a lot of jobs will be lost. So I think there is a problem with the semantics as well. And I think that makes a lot of people being very negative about the program even before it starts. So I think there's all of these softer changes that I think makes a huge impact in the success of a transformation program.
I'm going to speak on that. I think it's a really, really important point. The whole concept of a naysayer or permafrost or whatever other lovely names we have for these people, dinosaurs. There's a really interesting challenge here, right? Because understanding why they're naysayers is a really, really important point. Are they naysayers because they just don't like change and don't want to get into this digital world? Or are they naysayers because actually the way we measure them, the way we reward them, means they're actually being perfectly logical about pushing away from the change? Because if you measure somebody on their quarterly performance, why the hell would they spend 30% of their time on something that might deliver something in 5 years' time?
Yeah.
And that's not a naysayer challenge, that's a management challenge, right? As a board, you sort of need to make a decision. If we're going to be serious about transformation, we need to think about how we measure, how we reward, how we recognize all this stuff and align it, because otherwise, don't blame the naysayers, blame, look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Who does it well? You were going to say something else, James, but now I'm looking at you. So you've got to come up with something.
I don't know. I mean, from my relatively limited experience, but I worked in different banks for 4 years. I never saw one bank do it well, I wouldn't say. I never saw significant change in the period of time I was there. So, yeah, I don't think anyone in particular. From the people I still know who work in those banks, I think now they're starting to wake up to the idea that actually this having a separate product, separate team, siphoning off and having this digital arm is the way to do it. And I know a lot of the big banks are now doing that as their approach because they tried wholesale digital transformation, it didn't work, and so now it's this separate wing of the organization.
So this is like the schizophrenic panel, because earlier we heard that you don't want to siphon off this like little team and unit to do stuff because they're not going to have any sort of relationship with the rest of the organization, and so whatever they do is just not going to work there. And now you're saying actually you need to have this little skunk works project.
So I think you probably do need. I mean, it depends what you're trying to transform. It depends what the digital transformation you're trying to achieve is. But let's say you're trying to create a new product to compete with these new entrants into the market, which again, digital banking is a good example of that at the moment. That's happening. I cannot see if you don't say, right, we're going to have a separate team. We're going to enable them in the same way that these startups are enabling their teams to go and create something really cool that competes with it. I can't see how you're going to be able to achieve that with your existing organization.
Okay. Now, Anne, I want to hear what you want to say, but first I want to let everyone know that after Anne says her contribution, we're opening it up for questions. So Mark, Ali, and others, we're opening it up for questions after this. And come up with your questions. This is a test.
So I was just going to respond to that in terms of, it's a very complex issue and there isn't a simple answer. And I think, yes, there's different models for this stuff. It needs to be an and, I think. So, you create these accelerators outside, but where we've seen clients succeed is you've got your accelerator outside, but you've got some kind of feedback loop into the organization, or those people kind of cycle back into the core organization, and it becomes a virtuous circle. Unfortunately, there is no simple answer, but I think organizations have to do lots and lots of try different things and see what works.
All right. You're so optimistic.
Well,
it's outrageous.
There's a lot of opportunity, potential. I'm excited about it.
So just one last observation, actually. It's also, most organizations, you would say, are quite cyclical. So the real challenge, in addition to all the stuff we've said, I think is maintaining it. So, you can look at lots of organizations. I was just thinking Apple as you were talking. We all have a view on where they are now, but they've gone through a cycle of being, highly innovative, highly transformative in the market, to now we look and say, they're not really the company they used to be. And so with all of these organizations, they will all go through waves, and it's how they then keep adding the next wave on, or whether they actually plateau. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. If I did, I'd probably be very rich, but that is the real big challenge.
Fair enough. Questions? One over here, go for it. And then I see one there and then there. So I'll give an order. Excuse me, why don't we get 3 questions first, bring it back, and then alternate that way. So first question.
Thank you. I have a question for Anne from Optimist to Optimist. How do you balance Ogilvy going through transformation with the need for your clients to be advised on transformation?
Okay, there's one behind that gentleman. There's a lone hand in the smoke.
Hi there, thank you. So I actually work in one of the big banks in the digital sector and find that our team is actually enabled to do whatever we want in terms of the digital transformation, but face a lot of friction when it comes to collaboration. And is there anything you'd recommend that would actually lessen that?
Great. And there was a third question here, and then we'll super quick reply so we can get more from the audience. Right on the front row.
Hi. Where does the digital skills and training sits within the transformation? Trying to transform the company, how you bring them, all the people together, if they don't have the necessary skills, right, to be part of that journey.
Great. Quick replies so we get more from the audience. Anne, why don't you start?
Okay, so yes, Ogilvy, as Ogilvy and also part of WPP, we've been going through our own transformation. I think any company in our sector, in probably any sector that isn't going through a transformation, they're probably doing something wrong. I think ours has been kind of well documented. I think what we've found with clients as we've been going through our transformation, and again it will continue, is a lot of empathy. Again, optimist to optimist, but clients saying, we get it, we're in the trenches and we're dealing with this stuff all the time. And I think there's great partnership in that sense in terms of how we can continue to transform together. Our transformation is dependent on their needs as our customers.
Thanks.
So I think the question was about collaboration and how you engender that within an organization. So I don't think there's a one single answer, but I think what we've found is having very clear organizational goals which you can link that collaboration back to, help a lot. So I know what, for example, our product's goals are. We've got one team working on one problem, another on another, and they're dependent on each other. Whenever there's conflict or difficulty, we come together and we say, okay, is it going to achieve our overall goals? And I can't see any reason why that doesn't scale up to like a much bigger organization than we are.
Mm.
Skills?
I'll pick up on the skills bit. I think it's a really excellent question, actually, because yes, you can have the best frameworks in the world, you can have the best strategy in the world, but unless you actually have the people who know what to do and how to deliver on it, forget it. It's like building a house of cards. And it's a really important challenge, right? Because especially in a more, let's call them traditional corporates, one which we are, we're competing for the same talent as Amazon, Google, and everybody else, right? So how the hell do you get the right people? So I think the first thing is to really understand that journey. What does that kind of 4 or 5 year journey look like? What do we want to be the best at to really plot the gap between what we have and what we don't have, and where are we weak? And then you really need to switch from the sort of snowflake to the Bruce Lee mode of operation, because there will be people who can be trained and will be trained and are happy to do so. There will be people who can't, and we just don't have those skills. And recognizing that and being brutal about it is a crucial part of the next step. But I've also found from a personal experience that having a strong access to the startup ecosystem is a really good way to gain access to skills that we would find very, very difficult to recruit. Startup sees corporates potentially a nice distribution way into the market, and we've been super successful over the past kind of 4 or 5 years in bringing some people that would never have been able to recruit and bring to the table through just a normal recruitment or training process. So there are a few sort of levers you can pull on that.
I think I can add to that, because I think the hiring strategy plays a huge role. If you look at companies, let's say Google or Facebook, they are not focused on the sector when they're hiring people. They want good people. They don't actually care from which sector, what part of the world they come from. Whereas if you see a traditional bank, they would always hire people from another bank. So it's like a vicious circle. It's the same people you see in every bank because they all know each other. It's the same sector. So that's one thing. The other thing is collaboration between startups and corporates, as you've mentioned. Like for me, before Viacom, I was in Babylon Health, which is, as most of you might know, it's a digital health company. Completely different culture, completely different product, completely different sector. So moving from that to media has been obviously very different. And I think it's a huge risk for the company also to hire somebody who comes from a completely different background. It's a risk, but it could pay off, I think, if it's kind of utilized in the right direction. So I think you need buy-in from the people department, from learning and development, because you have to hire the right people, but you also have to upskill your existing employees in the right direction, so that it's a harmonious process of people development.
I think the other quick observation is, so the talent and recruitment part goes hand in hand with partnering, because you're never going to get all the people you need with all the skills you need.
Yeah.
I think the other part as well is the recruitment talent management bit is an ongoing, enduring activity. It's never done, because you will always lose people. You would hope your people will grow and go on to bigger, better things. So it's not doing it as an exercise, but doing it as an enduring activity. Always looking for the best people, irrespective of whether you have a specific role for them at that point in time. You have to keep it as an ongoing activity.
Okay, I'm not allowing anyone to talk more about skills. More questions. This is actually going to be the final battery of questions. So let's get as many as we can, be as short as you can. I see a question there, and then a second one there, and a third one there.
Hi, I'm John Monks from creative leadership company Curve, and I'm really interested to not talk about skills, but beyond that, the personal attributes that you think are important for leading this digital transformation. I'm picking up on optimism from Anne, but what more might there be?
Great.
Hi, James Say from Rope Manor Research. I wonder if you think the term digital is actually quite damaging, because it makes people straight away think about technology, whereas transformation is much more about people and process.
Great. There's one back there. Oh, there's two back there.
Hi, thank you, panel. My name is Amy, and I'm from WPP. I think that if there's anything we've observed, particularly in the last decade, is that transformation happens in a forward-moving gear. And as much as that's good, I'm also wondering there's a lot of risks that come with that, such as we may be moving faster than we're actually ready for. So from a company perspective, what are the kind of evaluations and assessments you'd have to make sure, okay, this transformation we want to happen, are we really ready for it? Thank you.
Great. And a little bit further on, right there.
Hi, good morning. This is Manish. My question is to Namrata. Yeah. Usually we have seen in doing any digital transformation, there's a huge gap between strategy and execution. How do you usually handle it? And I see that there is a huge risk, especially when we are dealing with big digital transformation programs.
Great. Any other questions? Or forever hold your peace. I see one over there, and I think we'll make that the last question. Raise your hand again. The mic is coming.
We have about 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to ask them one question each, and that's it. They're done.
Hi, Lauren Tyler from Southern Water, and this question is not reflective of my business. Top down, bottom up. I've always kind of read and heard that you need both to truly transform as a business. What do you do when the leadership is quite conflicted and not really working together? Is there any kind of hope or techniques or tactics for those on the ground that want to create a bit more of a revolution?
Okay. We don't have time to answer all these really smart questions. Is there any one that we as a consensus can agree will answer in like 1 minute? The one I would vote for is get rid of the word digital. It's about transformation, it's about people. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Probably makes, I mean, maybe we just answered it. Maybe it just makes sense to do that. No one disagrees with that.
Mark Reed was here yesterday. He said he's banned the word digital at WPP. So I'm going to be in trouble for being on this panel.
Understood. You know what? All of these were great questions, and I think it shows that there's a rich conversation to be had off the stage. I'm going to end with asking you guys one question, and you have to sort of choose in one direction or the other which way you go. You can't talk about digital transformation these days without the word AI in some variant coming up, right? AI is the new BS. Okay. So the question, however, there is some really interesting substance behind it, right? And I've written a book about it. I'm a true believer. From your experience, would you argue that the right heuristic for a company is to adopt and apply AI now in some part of your business? Or is the right heuristic wait until the technology matures, it's hype, and you're better off being a fast follower rather than a pioneer? So we'll say pioneer or follower. James?
I would say it's always better to be a pioneer.
Pioneer.
I absolutely agree.
Pioneer.
Pioneer. Pioneer.
All right, the audience. Pioneer, fast follower. Pioneer, raise your hand. Whoa. Follower, raise your hand. There you have it. Fortune favors the brave. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.